Hey Dad, would you like a VHS video recorder?
Well, actually, no, because I don't use VHS video recorders for my transfers. I always use Super VHS machines for NTSC and PAL. Well, there is a small exception to that. CCAM machines, you can only get those in plain VHS, but they're pretty rare anyway. So, no, generally speaking, I don't want VHS machines, no.
So I guess you won't want this then.
No, probably. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, this is interesting. It may only be a VHS video recorder, but there's something about this. Let's have a look. Oh, wow. This is unusual. These are quite a rare machine. Worldwide video. And the thing is, if this is a model I think it has, yes, digital system conversion. So you can select what output system you want, and it will pick up all the different types of input signal, including some weird ones like PAL-M, PAL-N, and it can do CCAM, and I think it'll handle MESI-CAM as well. So very special because it can be used in particular for these weird formats or for converting from CCAM to pure PAL, which is a process I can do at the moment with digital time-based correctors, but I'm never that impressed with the picture quality. This could be a very useful machine indeed. Let's give it a whirl. If this works, it could be a great piece of kit for playing French CCAM tapes. What does CCAM stand for? System essentially contrary to the American method, apparently. Right, it means something else really. Let's start anyway by just see if we play a PAL tape in this. So I've got it plugged into the monitor just by composite audio, plugged into my isolation power supply. I've got a PAL tape. Let's just give it a whirl. Switch it on. Right, that looks good. We have a remote, no batteries in it. Okay, I'll sort that out in a minute. Mechanically looks okay. It said stop and AV. Let's press play. Right, it's playing. The hi-fi sound is working, I think. Looks like we may have dirty heads. That'll probably just clean up in a minute. Let's do picture search. That can help. If you get every other sort of line, you get in picture and line, it means you've got one clogged head typically. There you go. Oh, I think the digital system's taking over a bit, but those lines in the picture are telling us that one head is probably clogged. Normally I'd expect it to start cleaning up by now. Okay, I have been told this machine is ultra low hours. It's only run a handful of tapes ever. So, okay, let's clean the heads since that doesn't seem to be improving much. Alright, and we'll inspect them if necessary. That's a little unusual. Normally you'd expect them to clean up. Either they're badly fouled or there's something else going on here. It's a little bit odd. Okay, I'll take the cover off and have a look. Just taking a visual of the head drum. It all looks very clean. Okay, tell you what we'll do. I'll get that set up under the microscope. See if we can adjust it so we can get the head tips under the microscope, and we'll get a closer look and show you. So I've set the microscope up at this hideous angle for the purposes of showing you the head tips, and I've had to remove a little bit of the mechanism to get to it. And we see there just one of the heads has a tiny bit of contamination to one edge, I think. There, not likely to be the cause of the problem, but we can clean that. Let's look through the rest of the heads. There's a little bit on the drum itself above it. Again, that's not going to be enough to stop the machine from working. They all look fine. Yep, that's the head gap in the middle there. And that one has that head gap to the edge. No, that's not true. So they're the head gaps. That could be contamination. Again, not enough to stop the machine from working, I don't believe. There's little spots on the drum there. Spin the head round. I think we're back to the start. So I can clean that up, but I don't see that there's a smoking gun there in terms of the machine not working. Right, that head tip I would say is clean. That was the first one we were looking at. Let's go across. A few spots in the head drum I can get rid of. Right, so this is one. There's a mark there which I don't think is in the manufacturer. I think that is a possibly contamination. Let's see if I can clean that off. That came off very easily actually, that bit. A few more spots on the drum to clean up. And this one, another one with a mark on it. That's done. The marks in the middle are where the head gap is, and that is normal. On a lot of heads you do see those marks there in the middle where the head gap is. Right, all head tips are now clean. 6 heads total, I believe. Not sure if any of those are flying arrays heads. Okay, so the heads are all cleaned up. Let's put a tape in it. PAL tape. Press play. It seems to be working now. You know, we're looking at a head contact problem here. Right, did you watch my video of the K mechanism, Panasonic K mechanism? They suffer from dry joints on the connections between the rotary transformer and the output to the head amplifier. And I'm beginning to suspect dry joints here. Let's tap around the area of the head drum. It's quite wobbly. More wobble than I'd expect, but maybe that's not too bad in itself. But I'm not seeing the noise come back the way it was. Not yet. What do you think? Was it just head contamination? Oh look, the noise is coming back. It seemed to be happening when I hit the PCB rather than the deck. Look, there it is. All the noises come back. Right. And the big thick search bars. Right. We've got a dry joint. I can't work out if it's on the head drum or the connections from the head drum or the PCB. So I'm going to have to start with the deck, look at connections on that. If I don't see smoking gun, sort of bad connection in there somewhere, then I'm going to have to look at the PCB. Definitely a dry joint issue. Okay, getting this apart isn't going to be a lot of fun. I don't like these decks where they mount, or these mechanisms where they mount the deck directly on the main PCB. It makes servicing very difficult because you can't test anything when you've got the deck out. Okay, let's work on that. Make sure it's all switched off and start by taking the deck out. There are, as often the case, 3 screws I suspect, 1, 2 and 3, one at the front there. Take those big screws out and then there'll be various connectors between the deck and the PCB. Okay, I've unplugged the flexi cables. I need to unplug the front carriage motor. That does unplug, doesn't it? One end or the other. There we go. There's an earthing cable here. I think I have to take this front brace off anyway. Okay, it turned out there were some screws on the underside of the machine that are associated with holding the deck in place. Right, and then unplug from a multi-way connector there. So now we need to look at where the head drum signals come, not the head transformer signals arrive actually through that multi-way connector, which goes to here. So there's not a lot of opportunity for things to go terribly wrong in this section. So I think we're looking at a dry joint issue on the main PCB, not on the deck, I think and hope. So I need to get the deck out and have a look underneath. There's a big screening plate on the bottom, but removing that I don't believe will get us any closer to looking at this mechanism. A bit of care, that's the mode switch, and it needs to line up. This point here, that hole will line up with that spigot. So if this gets moved, it's really important not to force things back together again. It needs to be assembled such that they line up when it's being reassembled. It is possible that this actual connection itself has been the problem, and by simply removing the deck and putting it back, the fault may go away. But let's not assume that for a moment. Let's see if I can find any dry joints on the main PCB underneath there. Which means disconnecting everything from the main PCB, which is just a pain, isn't it? It's been designed to be put together, not to be taken apart and worked on. So I'm going to have to disconnect the front panel here from this multi-way connector. There are some clips holding a PCB down. There's one here, another one at the front here, and I think I need to push them in to allow me to release the PCB. I don't think I'll learn anything by taking the bottom off, but I've got to try because I'm really struggling. Right, take the bottom off, and where does it get us? Probably nowhere. I can slightly better see that difficult clip here. It's not a difficult clip anymore. It's a gone clip. That wasn't my intention, but we'll take it. Got another one up here as well, but it looks like the PCB might just slide that way. If I can release the PCB from this front connector. Right, and then withdraw that front connector. Now hopefully the PCB will be able to go that way and away from these side clips a little bit. Now I think we're winning. Okay. We have the PCB out, and we're looking for dry joints around the back of this socket. So looking at the rear of the connector, which takes the signals from the heads, at first glance it looks okay, but let's take a closer look. And we can see definite hints of a dry joint on that connector. That one is even worse. In fact, that one really does have a distinct ring around it. That one too, it's crystallized and you can see a ring around it. These two maybe not so bad, but all of this solder looks crystalline. And there's something of a dry joint appearing on that one too. The worst one I'd say is, well, it's one of those two. Definitely seeing the solder dry jointing there, because the mechanical effect of the deck, even just being transported around, is going to jiggle the other side of this connector and tend to encourage dry joints. And of course this will be lead-free solder, which may not be the best. And looking at this, some of this earthing stuff here, this is like a screening connector for the deck, and again that's quite badly dry jointed. So I'm going to resolder all of those. I suspect they're the problem. You might say, well, none of those are really bad enough to actually make a connection fail, but you have to remember how tiny the signals are that come from the heads. An absolutely tiny amount of energy in those signals. So connections like this are going to introduce noise, and that's what we're seeing, I believe. I'm just going to follow where some of these signals go and confirm that we don't have any other dry joints anywhere else. Okay, having done that, I've got the not so pleasant task of reassembling all this back into the chassis, and I'll also clean up various things. The remote control is quite dirty, and the front panel of the machine itself needs a good clean. So I'll reassemble and clean it up. Does it have a full digital time-based corrector? Actually, I suspect not. Right, let's reassemble it. I'm going to try and push it under these horrible clips on the end, rather than force the PCB past them. Okay, good. They're in. So it's located. Front panel, being careful with this connector. You know, hopefully the deck will still line up properly. Here we are. I've got this receptor here for the locating spigot on the, well, this drives this, because this is the mode switch, and that's the mode switch cam. See, it's got one drive belt, but that appears to be in good condition, so I'll leave that alone. And this is our crucial connector. We're hoping that there isn't any issue inside the head drum between here and the transformer, because of course that would be another source of the fault we've seen. I don't think there is, but let's not wiggle that too much. Let's carefully put it together. We have the three big deck screws to refit. If they all go in properly, then hopefully it's all sat down properly. The nuisance factor is, of course, we can't test any of this until it's reassembled. What I've not yet done is refit the bottom shielding and screws. I'll do that later once we've tested whether the system works. So I've got the AC head assembly. One thing I don't like on more modern machines like this is that they use a ribbon cable for this, and they're not screened. So I think the audio quality from the linear output mono head on this kind of machine could be slightly noisier than on a older, more conventionally built machine which has screened cabling. You have to remember, so the signals from heads are really, really small. I think we're ready to test it, so I'll set you up so you can see that view. Play. Oh! It's still covered in noise. Yes. So that implies that the problem is in the head drum. Oh, that's a nuisance, isn't it? So I've got good results there, but by tapping, I can instigate the fault again. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can see the noise on there. See all the white streaks. You see they come and go as I tap. There's a lot of lateral wobble, which I think does rule out there being a digital time-based corrector. So I think we're going to have to take the deck out again, but not all the rest of it. I believe just the deck, and see if we can dismantle the head drum assembly. Oh dear. Well, looking at the service manual for this, it appears I'm on my own because it just treats this whole assembly as a replaceable item. You can't even, apparently, replace the upper head drum. So it's up to me to decide if I'm going to take that out and see if I can get to the connections for the head transformers. I don't want to write the machine off, you know, it's a gamble. If it goes wrong, I could be in a worse place than I am now. But initially, let's just take, I don't know, what should I do? Should I take the, this is the motor, should I take the motor off the top? See what access that gives us? Very little, I suspect. Let's have a look. Okay, that's the kind of motor I'd normally expect to see underneath, but it's on the top on this one. And we have screws here for the heads, the head drum, so I can take that off, take those screws out and see where it gets us. Not really sure what to expect now. Okay, that's just the bottom part of the motor. So now we're looking at the upper head drum. There's nothing here, just a spring, which I need to be wary of. If I do turn it upside down now, that spring would fall out, so need to be a bit careful with that. So what will happen if I take the drum out from underneath? Will it give us any access? I suspect not, but we're going to have to try, aren't we? So out comes the deck again. Okay, the drum is mounted in an unusual fashion. It's held in by brackets rather than screws underneath. I'm not sure this is going to give us any better access, but let's undo one of the brackets. We may have to undo them all, or at least slacken them off. Okay, we have the head drum out. But how useful is that to us? Not very. If I undo that grub screw there, then presumably I can take this off and maybe the upper head drum will come off. That's a 1.5mm hex and that seems to be too big. Maybe this will help. Now this 1.5mm seems to fit. I found a tiny component and I'm not sure where that comes from, so that's worrying. And are we able to take the head drum off now? Well, it came up a bit and it seemed to stick. Feels like it should come up off this top of this shaft. Why is it stuck? You can see the rotary transformer underneath just about, and our concern is the connection between this and the rotary transformer. But we'll also check the soldering of the head tips to its transformer. But how can I get it out? It just goes that far and seems to stop. Bit of grot on the top of the shaft maybe? Or maybe where the grub screw to this was done up, it's put a small chink in it. Yes, that was it. Right, we have it apart. First thing I'm going to do is look for dry joints on the head connections. I'm looking now at the connections between the head tips, which are here, and the transformer windings. Let's go through those and just have a look at them. Right, that set appears to be good on the heads labelled H. In a set labelled O. There could be an issue with soldering underneath the glue, which would be extremely hard to get to. Then we have, I think that one's labelled 8. I'm going to come back to that one. That doesn't look quite so good. Let me come back to that 8 one in a moment. Keep looking at the others. Another O, they look fine. And another 8. So back to this one. So that's the only one I have any doubts around. Just that one there. I just wonder how much of that wire is going into the solder. I'll just gently touch that, I think. This little part here. Nope, that's fine, that's secure. It's a glob of solder on top of the glue here, though. It's interesting. Get rid of that. So I'm not seeing anything there that's obviously wrong. What about on the transformer part? I may not be able to see anything at all here. Can I get the transformer out? How is it mounted? I think it's glued. So I can't get to where the flexi cable comes through from the PCB, well, from the connector to the PCB to the back of the transformer. I can't get to that at all because I think the transformer is glued in place. So what can I do? Well, I could just do some ohms tests of the winding connections here and wiggle it and jiggle it and see if maybe we feel the connection problem is at this end rather than that end. Right, I don't know which end is which, but I've got the pin out for the connection, and I'm gonna guess that this is pin 10 here. I'm going to work from back from pin 10. So we've got 4 contacts that should all be connected together by no more than a few ohms. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. 1, 2, 3, 3. Okay. And then it's a ground, I think. Looking from the other end, I should have 3 that connected together. So that's the SP heads. And then we should see S and LP heads. Right. So the only contact that doesn't appear to be made is this 4th one, which is the ground for the hi-fi heads. And that's not relevant because it's not a hi-fi problem. So it's going to be channel 1 or 2 of the SP that is playing us up. So it's going to be this end, I think. We've got a common, so we should have common, we should have lowest resistance there. And the same low resistance there, about 2 ohms, and add them together, about 4 ohms. Right, so that's almost certainly the video heads on that end. And am I suffering from poor contact on any of those? It's hard to wiggle it and jiggle it. I mean, one of them is reading 2.5 ohms, and the other's reading 1.5 ohms. What am I getting on my probes? About 0.2. So one end So the channel 1 is giving me 2.5 ohms, and channel 2 is giving me about 2 ohms, 1.9. Enough difference to be real? I don't think so, because it could depend on the resistance could change depending on the position in how long the wiring is, because of the position on the tracks there. Because we can't see the other side of this, we don't know which windings are those contacts. They're going to be either the innermost or the outermost. All very similar numbers. So I'm not seeing any resistance values there that would imply that I have a bad contact in the lower part of the transformer. But if it's in the glob of glue going to the head tips, then there's nothing I can do about it. I can make some resistance checks, but of course I'm going to be measuring the heads as well as the transformer windings. So just measuring the resistance of some of these heads. Well, I measure them all, but of course I'm being shorted out by head windings. So that's pretty low, that one. 0.6 it's reading. 0.3, I mean that's really low. That's very, very short circuit indeed. 0.3 there, very, very short circuit. 0.4, slightly higher, about 0.8. 0.3, so the highest one is that. Going back to the highest value resistance I saw, which is actually the middle track on the transformer pretty much. When I press hard enough, that actually goes down to 0.3 as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any smoking guns anywhere. So I'm not seeing any windings on either the lower part of the transformer or the upper part with the heads, which really tell us we have a poor contact. But of course the possibility is that the problem is in the head itself, and the only way I could detect that would be to desolder the transformer from them all, which I suppose I could do, but carries a small amount of risk. What do you think? And what am I going to learn? And there's also the possibility in doing that you could actually damage the heads with the current from the multimeter. So I'm not sure I want to do that. I suppose I've convinced myself that the only way I'm really going to know what's going on here is to test the heads. So I'm going to have to spring one connection from each head tip, that one, the outer one, and then measure the resistance of the coil, the head coil itself, without the transformer being in the circuit. If we see one that's massively different, we may have some idea where to look. A bit of a problem is that I don't know which head is which, and if I was much cleverer than I am, I might be able to immediately identify these pairs of heads as being some particular function, as opposed to these single ones. But I don't know which are standard play, long play and hi-fi, so I'm going to have to isolate them all 6 of them, and make those measurements. Okay, all 6 are isolated. I'm going to start with this double head that's in the red here and rotate round from there. So I'm going to measure the resistance of the head chip without the coil, 1.2 ohms, and then the coil without the head chip. A little bit harder to do. Yeah, it's a bit hard to do that. Alright, I'm not going to do those. I can't easily access them. Let's just measure the resistance of the head tips then. But 0.6 ohms. That's a little higher, isn't it? Let's push into the solder slightly more. That is distinctly higher, isn't it? 1.8 ohms. That's the top one of the green. It's the top one of the single green. But then that's the same. 1.5. Yeah, they're all pretty similar. Oh, that's higher, is it? That does seem higher, doesn't it? It's certainly the highest. I'm just pushing down on the glue slightly. See if that's changed it at all. No. So I'm going right through the glue actually. I'm just going to do them all. Just push down on the glue a little bit. Okay, let's reconnect the desoldered wires throughout and try to reassemble the machine. Right, let's set about reassembling all this. There are many things that could go wrong here. I'll refit the motor on the top after I've installed the drum back onto the deck. So the alignment is set by those pins on the deck, and these brackets just hold it down onto the pins. Okay, we had this spring to refit onto the top of the head here. That's not right, that's falling too far in. Okay, maybe we now understand what this component is. This tiny thing, I reckon, fits below the spring. Then a spring sits on top of that. That looks more like it. I'm much happier now I've worked out what that part was. I may have fitted this in the wrong place. I'm going to have to go back and look at my previous footage to see which way around this was. Okay, I see my error. I just planted this in any old place. It needs to be around there. Can I do this while it's in this condition? Probably not. Oh dear. I believe that's approximately correct. It's not precision alignment, but that will allow me to put the top part of the motor in the correct place. Hey look, there's an alignment bump there, and that alignment bump lines up with this part of the motor. I'm not sure I'd done that properly last time either. That's better. Okay, I can now refit the top part of the motor. Okay, you'll be watching it with me. Let's see if it works at all and if it's any better. There's so many things I could have mucked up. We could have no signal. The head may not run properly. Lots of things could go wrong now. Play. tracking's coming in. We have some new problems. We have an alignment fault. Look, we've got a mistracking at the bottom. So maybe I didn't quite sit the head down properly. I've messed up the alignment somehow. That will need fixing. What about the actual original fault? That. Can I instigate the fault? I mean, it wobbles like heck when you hit it. We have hi-fi sound. So I've just messed up the alignment somehow. I could reset the guides, but I think I'd rather just find out what I've done wrong. It seems that I've either got the whole head drum not sat properly, or maybe the drum hasn't been reassembled properly, which is a nuisance. I have to take it all apart again. The only good news is I've fixed the original fault, it would appear. But I've messed up the alignment somehow. That's a nuisance, isn't it? Let's just look at picture search. Yeah, that's looking really, really good. So I've definitely fixed the fault, but introduced a new one. Okay, what could be wrong? The fact that it's on the bottom of the picture implies it's the exit guide area. I mean, maybe I could just adjust the exit guide, but that doesn't feel right. It feels like there's a fundamental error somewhere. Alright, well, it's progress. It's a bit late at night, so we'll come back to this. I think it was a position, you know, of that collar on the top of the motor. I think that sets a head switching point. It's a lot better now, and I've just physically dragged it around slightly. Excuse my thumb. Let's drag it around a tiny bit more. There we go. And the clue was the angle this cable was coming out was slightly off. So that now looks a lot happier. You can actually set the head switching point in software as well. You use the standard remote control, and there's a test button here that the consumer wouldn't normally know about because it's not available from the front panel. You press that in a certain key sequence, and you can adjust the head switching point in the firmware of the machine. But I don't need to. I think that is perfect. Let's look at the picture search now. That is looking mightily perfect. Let's drop in that CCAM tape. So we want the output in PAL. Looking very good. Or is the tracking a bit to one end? It looks like the tracking might have been a bit to one end, so we might still have a little bit of fine tweaking to do to try to get the tracking on center. Okay, so just a reminder where we've got to. It's working fine, but when I press play, it starts with no picture sometimes, or it's way off tracking, and then you see the tracking bar hunting around, which it does to find out where the best picture is, but then it tends to finish at one end, right? It finished at the very end, which means the offset tracking, the sort of tracking center point, is way off. So a quick reference to the service manual on how to set that up, and there's a adjustment on the audio control head which allows you to set the tracking point. But the way the instructions say that you set it up is you look at the FM envelope, which I've done on many occasions on previous videos, and the FM envelope is available here on the connector. But I'm not going to get my scope probes down there. It's really awkward. And I would have to make up a cable to connect to that, to connect my scope probes up. So I'm probably just going to eyeball it on the picture. But what they do have is a service feature. So you put it into a service feature which disables the auto tracking, and we'll just hold it at the center. So then I can adjust the audio control head to get a reasonable picture on there, and then disable the service mode, and it should work a lot better. Right, so I'm going to need remote control and instructions to find out how we set this. So it says you press the test button and then I think number 5, and that's it on the remote control. I'm not sure if it's at the same time or what, we'll have to experiment, and we should get to the point where the auto tracking is disabled. Right, let's do that. Okay, so let's put in a tape. So apparently you press test and 5. Not sure if you press them at the same time or just one after the other. So I'll try one after the other initially. Let it finish its tracking. Right. Test 5. Ah, look, it's set the tracking to center. No? Is it set tracking to center? Do that again. Test 5. Alright, tracking to center. So now we can adjust this AC head. Let me show you that. So what I'm going to do, I believe, is undo a screw, not that easy to get to, undo this screw here, which will free, quite tight, free the head block and allow me to adjust it. And what they say is you can put a screwdriver into this slot here. Can we see that slot? Put a screwdriver into that slot on the front of the head. This would be easier if you didn't have a shell on the front of the tape. And adjust the head. Oh, it does seem to be making a difference actually. I'll just give it an adjustment. I'll just see if I can just do it by hand for a moment and we'll see. Okay, I've gone too far. I've got a perfect picture, but the control head is so far out, so far off position now, I think we'll get lip sync errors. So I need to kind of get it roughly back into the middle. Okay, and when it's way off you get that. So I just need to set that. My problem is I'm trying to film it and do it at the same time. It's making it much harder than it should be. Right, that looks pretty well centered. It's just too hard to film and do, so let me actually just do it. Right, that looks nicely tracked. And it's actually only a few millimeters away from where it was earlier. Right, that looks a lot better. And it says test. On the display there. That's much better. And that's with tracking, auto tracking disabled. And to get out of this, we switch it off and on again apparently. So off and on. Go for play. And then the auto tracking will work. Oh, it didn't. Maybe I need to power cycle it rather than just switched it off at my isolation transformer. Power up. Into play. And it seems to be working really well, but I'm not sure the auto tracking functioned. Everything's working, but I didn't see the auto tracking. Is there a tracking button on the remote which still needs cleaning up? Tracking, here we are. Auto, press auto. There we go. And where does it finish up? A little off center position. Let's eject the tape, put it in again, and then that forces it to do a retract. You see, looking for tracking. Oh, it's hit a bad bit of tape, which is a bit unfortunate. But it finished just off centre. Let's put that pre-recorded C-cam tape in. Right. We might have got that more centred if I'd looked at the FM envelope and set it up with that. But I don't really have time to make up a cable to do that right now. I'd like to get this video out this week. Let's just do a quick picture search and make sure that looks good. I might see if I can centre that just a tiny bit more. This is why I should be using the FM envelope. I know. What's your auto tracking position now? So it hunts around looking for a good place and then bang in the middle. That I love. Good. Demonstrate that again. So it goes to the left, goes to the right and sticks it bang in the middle. Absolutely perfection. Right, I couldn't have done any better if I'd set it up with the oscilloscope anyway. That's really nice. And the interesting thing is that relative to that adjustment slot, the audio control head position is literally 1.5 millimeters away from where it was factory set. So I'm not concerned that's going to cause a lip sync error by having shifted it too far. Right, we'll do a few more taps to make sure that we really have got rid of this problem. You know, that wobble says it definitely does not have a digital time-based corrector in it. But that fault with all the snow on one of the heads, it definitely doesn't seem the most stable mechanism I've ever come across. And I think this is just because it's modern. Older equipment, I mean a good old Sony Beta, you know, the deck was built like a tank and there was a lot less sort of, you know, this mechanical variation caused by small wobbles in it. It just wouldn't do that because the whole thing was much more solid. This is made with very thin material and lots of plastics, and it's just a typical modern deck. So from that point of view, it's nothing special, but it's this systems conversion that's really useful on this machine. And I must say, it is giving a pretty good picture. It's working quite well. Okay, I need to do a lot of cleaning up because that is really quite manky, as is the front panel. These buttons have gone all grotty, and I need to refit the big metal plate underneath and the screws associated with that and the feet. So let's get on with all that stuff. As with many machines, it's important to open this before you put the front on, otherwise it will miss the opening lever at the top here. Tracking sits very near the middle. This has got some more features on it, you know, like if I pause it, got slow motion, jog and shuttle, and strobe and art. What are they about? Okay, so it keeps taking shots and art where it pixelates it. Does this remind you of those incredible, if rather pointless, features on a pair of Grundig machines I have, one of which I repaired? They use a Panasonic K mechanism, earlier G mechanism, and they've got a digital sort of feature thing going on like this, which lets you do all kinds of silly things. In that case, it lets you do stuff with teletext as well, but it has this sort of art and strobe and all these sort of features on it. And that also doesn't have a digital time-based corrector exactly. It has a memory in it, but it's not a full digital time-based corrector like this. But they are not multi-standard. This multi-standard feature is really what makes this so useful. Well, I'm absolutely delighted with the way this has come out. It's a very unusual machine. I know it's only VHS, but it can support things like PAL-M from Brazil, and I've had to turn work down in the past for that format because so few machines will support it. And it's also going to make running CCAM tapes easier for me because I don't have to go from CCAM to PAL with a digital time-based corrector. So it's a wonderful machine, very useful indeed. Now, you could argue, well, has he really fixed it? Did he ever find out what the fault was? I'm fairly certain that what fixed it was when I went round with the sharp probe and pushed down on the glue, which was above the soldering for the head tips to the small PCBs that then connect to the upper part of the rotary transformer. And you could say, well, I should have just got rid of the glue and resoldered all of those. If I'd disturbed the glue on those, I would almost certainly have broken one of the head tips. It was a risk not worth taking. And I think even if I'd had this 10 times, I reckon half the time I'd have trashed the machine. I was very lucky to be able to fix this. Now, of course, we went way beyond what the service manual said we could do. The service manual unusually treats the entire head drum assembly as a replacement item. The upper and lower drum and motor is all one item for this. You're not supposed to split it down and even replace the upper head drum. I've never seen a video recorder where the entire drum is considered one item. So we were going way beyond what the manufacturers would have us do. And I think considering what we've had to do here is a pretty amazing outcome. Now, I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future and a few other things as well. So, I'll see you then. Bye for now.